It used to be called the Great Game, major power rivalry in Central Asia, chiefly Britain and Russia. It's moved to the Caucasus, but the rules of the game haven't changed that much. It's about influence and resources. So, how is the game impacting the countries of the region? Join me, Darasz, for how we got here.
Stretched on the border between two continents, over the centuries the Caucasus was ruled by several empires, including the Roman, Byzantine, Mongol, Ottoman and Iranian. But in the 19th century, much of the region was conquered by Russia. Foreign rule continued for more than 100 years, until the fall of the Soviet Union. In 1991, Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia gained independence, but Dagestan and Chechnya did not. This led to two wars between Chechen separatists and Russian forces in the 1990s and early 2000s. Throughout the years, Georgia and Russia fought over Abkhazia and North Ossetia, while Armenia and Azerbaijan disputed over the Nagorno-Karabakh border region. Last year, Armenia lost control of the territory. A quick Azeri takeover operation was passively watched by Russian peacekeepers stationed in the region. Yerevan, up until recently a Russian ally, has suspended its membership in the Moscow-led CSTO alliance. Georgia has been the most openly pro-Western force in the region. Just last year, the EU officially granted the country candidate status. But the government in Tbilisi has since adopted a foreign agents law, modeled after a similar legal solution in Russia. EU officials have criticized the decision, calling Georgia to return to the path leading to the EU, and thousands of people marched against the bill, unsuccessfully. The nations of the Caucasus have been navigating between East and West for centuries, and it seems that holding this delicate balance is key to their survival in the region.
I'm joined today by Iwona Kaliszewska, the Assistant Professor at the Institute of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Warsaw. Welcome to the programme.
Welcome.
Your speciality is the North Caucasus region, but can you give us a kind of a broad brush picture of the region as a whole, including the south?
Well, sometimes it depends who is speaking. Like if Russia is talking about the Caucasus, they kind of forget about North Caucasus and speak it as a part of Russia, because politically and nominally it is a part of Russia, whereas the South Caucasus, the three sort of independent states of Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, form a so-called North Caucasus. But of course divisions are sort of artificial, because culturally, like for example, the region of Abkhazia would be closer to the North Caucasus, and you cannot just divide the two regions by the mountain range, because this is the mountain range that divides North Caucasus from the South Caucasus. And now it's also a political border, because on the mountain range there is a border between Russia and Georgia and Azerbaijan.
You mentioned the Russian influence and the fact that the North Caucasus is de facto a part of, or is treated as part of Russia. Was the mountain range an easy border to stop at, or did the Russian Empire, 19th century, progress further south? How did that?
They did progress, expansion? But nevertheless, the mountain range was Soviet Union was, of course, incorporating Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia as well. But after it fell apart, leaving the republic's independence. So North Caucasus stayed within the Russian borders, although Chechens tried hard to get out of the Russian Federation, but their independence struggle failed. So at this time now, we have North Caucasus that is culturally different from the rest of Russia, ethnically, but it is within the borders of the Russian Federation.
Was there any a similar independence movement in Dagestan, like there was in Chechnya, for example? These two brutal wars that were waged in there.
Not similar, because the Chechen movement has been very strong, and because Russia tried to brutally stop it, it became even stronger. And only after the Russia totally brutally stopped the independence movement, it ceased to exist, or almost ceased to exist. Whereas Dagestanis, seeing what is happening in Chechnya, they kind of played soft and tried to negotiate with Russia their political positions. So they never, as a whole group of people, as the inhabitants of Dagestan, they never took weapons against Russia. There was a struggle for independence within a group of people, but never as a all national movement.
So is this an Islamist kind of movement? We hear about the Dagestani, for want of a better word, terrorist attacks. Is that supported or inspired by the Islamist revolutions?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated like that, because Chechen movement, it started as a national movement, like as a struggle for independence. So it had more national than Islamic incentives. But of course, later on, as the political situation in the world has been changing, it acquired an Islamic leg, and it became more Islamic. Same in Dagestan, there were small struggles for independence, but not really realistic ones, because there are too many ethnic groups in Dagestan. So if all of them struggle for independence, that nobody believed that it can succeed. And then the movement that used Islamic, that used Islam, it became more. It started to unite people from the Caucasus. So there was a movement struggling. There was a movement whose incentive was to separate the North Caucasus from Russia, and it did have on Islamic terms. So it was the Emirate. So the so-called Emirate Caucasus Emirate. But around 2014, it has been disassembled by the army and FSB, by the force of the Russian Federation.
Is how much have the two countries, or the groups within these countries, the ethnic groups, have they acquiesced in being part of Russia, or do we in the West make too much of this idea of these peoples wanting an independence? Presumably they just want peace and quiet.
Most of them, most likely, yes. So it's difficult to speak for the whole populations. Like, these two republics are very different. Chechens still hold this feeling of revenge of the failed wars. So some of the Chechens still believe that independence at some point is possible. Whereas Dagestanis, who had never experienced war, like in recent times, they are more peaceful with the idea that their republic is within the Russian borders, which still does not mean that they are loyal to the Russian Federation. The loyalty comes with money. So Russia invests a lot of money in the region recently, so that the people stay quiet. So as long as there is money, I don't think any kind of independence movement or decolonial movement is going to happen in Dagestan.
Yeah, so loyalty can be rented.
Loyalty can be rented, and it is being rented. It can be seen as rented because local politicians in Dagestan, they do not have much power other than the money they get from Moscow and the power structures. They are also they can also in some way control. So there is no loyalty to the people in power.
Yes. Moving south of the mountains, we hear about Russian complaints that the United States is interfering in countries like Armenia, trying to carve them away from their traditional Russian historic ties. Is this mountain range going to be a natural stopping point for the United States? Are they just going to, as you mentioned earlier, just leave the North Caucasus to Russia?
the United States have barely interfered in the North Caucasus. It has always been seen as a part of Russia, regardless what was happening there. Was it like journalist kidnappings or extrajudicial killings? Like the West kind of always turned a blind eye to what was happening in the North. It's different for the South Caucasus. Obviously, there is soft power both from Russia and from United States, from the West. However, like countries like Armenia, for example, that Russia has always perceived as countries loyal to them. Like people in these countries, for the most part, perceived the loyalty to Russia as a sort of forced marriage. Like they knew that there is Turkey around or Azerbaijan, so Russia is their only ally. But it felt more like a forced marriage. So it's not like this people has been so much pro-Russian, and now United States is coming and telling them otherwise. So there has been soft power, obviously, for the last years, but it's not like it's something new, and it's not like it has not been happening from the Russian side too.
Yes. What is the main attraction for great power intervention in the Caucasus? Is it transit routes or is it resources?
There are transit routes from Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan is the only of the places that really has oil and has resources. So obviously, if the country has resources, there is more interest in them, and there is more of a turning blind eye to arrests of people. Like even recently, an anthropologist from Azerbaijan has been arrested by Azeri authorities, and we kind of don't think about it because Azerbaijan is an ally state, so why care so much?
It's a very multi-patchwork area. What is it that attracts you, particularly to the culture of the north as opposed to the south? I mean, we see Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia as very ancient kingdoms. Is it a different social setup, a different social history, traditions in the north?
There are pretty similar traditions, but many people would hate me for saying that. Although, like,
why would that be?
Well, because like Georgia and Armenia are Christian, and Azerbaijan and Dagestan are Muslim, and saying that, kind of.
Okay.
But
treading on the wrong toes.
At the end of the day, we're often like family traditions, or there are many similarities, but of course there are also many differences. And I was kind of drew to that because South Caucasus is explored by Western anthropologists or sociologists, where the North Caucasus is a place where people were not really venturing to go because it is after all part of Russia, and also it's got a hotbed for a sort of terrorist activity, so it had a bad reputation. So it was interesting to see what this bad reputation really means.
And does it conform to the notions of what it is? The bad reputation, as you mentioned?
No.
Or is it a different picture?
It actually doesn't. Everybody was telling me, oh, you're going there is like dangerous, there are car bombs. It's like, well, yeah, there are occasionally car bombs, but I'm pretty sure that I'm more at risk driving a car there or being in a taxi than being killed in a terrorist attack. So it has very much been overblown, and a lot of violence, way more violence has been experienced by people from the state, from the power structures, rather than from the so-called terrorists. There has been a terrorist violence, it's undeniable, but it's been way smaller in scope than the violence that came from the state. I was always way more afraid of the state than of the terrorists.
Final question to you. How do you see in the next year or two the situation in the Caucasus, both north and south? We've had a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. How do you see is it going to be just more of the same?
I'm afraid it's going to be more of the same, like Russia will very unlikely fall apart, and North Caucasus will not suddenly claim its independence. Like for that to happen, Russia would have to totally collapse economically. If the money doesn't flow, then yes, people will have nothing to lose. But if the money is there, I don't believe North Caucasus is going to go anywhere else. As for the south, I think what have happened, what has happened has already happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and for now, Karabakh will stay in Azerbaijani hands.
As long as the money flows, you can get the loyalty. But Professor Kaliszewska, thank you very much for coming onto the programme.
Thank you.
Yes, so that's all we have time for today. Join us next time for How We Got Here.